Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, taking a deeper dive into this Florida State LSU Week 1 matchup as we are closing in on, I think, one of the best games that we'll see all year. About a month ago, we took a look into it, kind of giving some of our preliminary thoughts. Few things have changed. Obviously, Mason Smith with the one-game suspension won't be playing in this game. Couple different storylines. Now, before we get into it, I just want to say, one, thank you to you guys. The support you guys have shown with these game breakdowns truly does mean a lot. So if you do enjoy the content, you want to support the boys, consider subscribing to the channel. But more importantly, like what I'll say is when we talked Florida State LSU about a month ago, the discussions in the comment section, like that's what represents what college football is about. And we had LSU fans, Florida State fans. I don't even know where I'm going to go with this pick right now. And like the discussion, I was absolutely loving it, jumping in. So appreciate you guys. Let us know in the comment section who you guys are riding with. Again, going to be one of the best games that we see all year. Dill, I'm going to kick this one off to you. Where you want to start? How are we feeling about this matchup now that we're less than 2 weeks out?
I mean, obviously one of the best non-conference game, arguably with Alabama, Texas, but it's right up there. I mean, team to team, this might be the better game, honestly. And in two programs that are just in a very exciting spot. Both are like kind of getting back on track. Obviously, Florida State really revving it up in the recruiting. LSU's been recruiting very well too. Like just two teams that are heading in the right direction and in right on the cusp of that playoff level. And this game's probably going to show a lot in terms of which of these teams is kind of going to be the first.
I would take it one step farther. I think both these teams can win a national championship. I just saw Bruce Feldman pick LSU to win a national championship. Florida State, this seems like the culminating year for them. Like Jordan Travis, Jared Verse, Johnny Wilson, all of them coming back. They make phenomenal additions in the transfer portal. For both these teams, you're entering the season thinking it's a national championship year. And I think the beauty of it is even if whoever team loses, like I think so you're still in the college football playoff discussion because whatever team wins is going to be a bona fide top 3 team in the country. So Dill, I want to start with the Florida State offense against this LSU defense because we've had a lot of moving parts, specifically on the LSU defense in the last couple of weeks that we haven't really talked about. One, you lose Mason Smith for this game, which I'm just so salty about, like improper benefits. Mason Smith, probably one of the guys I was most excited to see play this year.
Has no sense of the moment. It's like,
no,
why can't you just like let the guy play this game? It's like we're all excited for it. Does it really make a huge difference?
And Florida State has a gripe too. Daryl Jackson doesn't get his waiver. I mean, like we all, whether you're a Florida State LSU fan, we hate the shake hands. We don't rock with the NCAA. We're Michigan fans. We don't rock with the NCAA. They just gave Jim Harbaugh. We're all pissed at the NCAA here. Now, Dill, I think getting into the matchup, what I'm most concerned with LSU, and I've talked with a few LSU fans who kind of share this concern in the comment section, you're going to see a really potent passing attack. Jordan Travis, I think, continues to make steps as a pocket passer. This is by far the most talented group of wide receivers that he's surrounded by. Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman, Winston Wright, my guy, Dustin Hill, been making some moves in fall camp. This LSU secondary, it's banged up. It's kind of, they're still trying to find their guys. I guess we'll start there. Like, how do we see that shaking out? Because I think that's one of the key matchups of this game.
And that'll be the interesting thing because, frankly, last year, they brought in a fair amount of talent in the portal. But this secondary really did never find it. They reloaded it this year. I think it was good. They got a bunch of new faces in, some young guys, obviously. That will be and if I had the answer to it, like a crystal ball, that'd be awesome, but I don't. And frankly, if they can't keep up this Florida State team, they're going to beat them up in the air because I think Jordan Travis is, again, one of those guys who just constantly slept on. Now, I think for a long time at Florida State, he dealt with an offensive line that really didn't give him
and wide receiver play for most of Jordan Travis's career. Even like going into last year, we were like, who's going to step up in this wide receiver room? He finally has a good offensive line, finally has a really dynamic group of wide receivers, and has significantly improved as a pocket passer. What my question is you're going to need some big question marks to step up for LSU. And we've always said it's a numbers game, and they got a lot of talented guys in the back end, but you're going to rely on a guy in Zy Alexander who's jumping up from the FCS level to all of a sudden go up against potential first-round draft picks in Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman. Denver Harris, I think, will have to play a little bit in this game too, even though he's kind of in the doghouse a little bit. Talented, but some question marks there. You might be trotting out Javon Toviano, who's a true freshman. I think I said Javian Toviano, I believe. Liked him out of high school. true freshman again. So that's where I think I'm starting is I'm really optimistic for Florida State. And I wouldn't say optimistic, but if I'm a Florida State fan, like I'm looking to get after the secondary that's got new faces, inexperienced faces, and quite frankly, just some uncertainty in a group.
I will say, though, you compare this unit to LSU last year, it's just far more talented. And that's the big difference. Like last year, yes, they had some experienced guys, but they weren't like wildly talented players. And you kind of saw that, like not a ton of draft picks from that secondary. This unit, if these guys play good football, I mean, Denver Harris, he's an NFL player. Zion Alexander, NFL player. Javian Toviano, NFL player. So they have guys who are legitimate NFL talented guys. Last year, again, they had experienced guys coming from decent-sized schools, but they were guys who really never played ultra high-level football. If LSU gets what they need out of the secondary, or not, I don't want to say goes, but like gets some play out of the talent, if you will, or however you want to say that, this is a unit that, again, they can challenge Florida State. I don't think they'll shut them down necessarily, but they can challenge this. Not get run out.
One of the things that I think is so under talked about in terms of if you haven't, like I always make this comparison, Kirby Smart before he went into the 2021 year for the Georgia Bulldogs saying, hey, we got question marks in our secondary room. It turned out to not matter because the pass rush for Georgia just didn't really allow quarterbacks to even get on their spot and deliver throws down the field. That is one thing I'm really excited about. Even without Mason Smith, I think you're looking at a front seven that might be the best in the country. I mean, you still have guys like Mekhi Wingo, Savion Jones, Ovie Gofu, obviously Harold Perkins. What I'm looking for is I get Florida State has gotten much better on the offensive line, not only more talented, but deeper as well. If LSU wants to stop this passing attack, I think a large part is getting after Jordan Travis, getting him off the spot. And I don't think there's a better guy in the country in terms of Harold Perkins as potentially playing that quarterback spot and keeping Jordan Travis in the pocket. That's where I like LSU on defense, is controlling Jordan Travis, keeping him in the pocket, and making him a little bit unsettled back there.
And that's the thing. I think Harold Perkins might be as good as anyone in terms of dealing with athletic quarterbacks. Like you saw how big of a problem he posed for Bryce Young, and Bryce Young might not be quite the athlete Jordan Travis is, but they both play that similar game. They both like to scramble out of the pocket and throw on the run. And when Harold Perkins was hunting him down, he was constantly getting to him and making plays. So Harold Perkins, we didn't see him in last year's game really against Florida State. I think this adds a huge dynamic. And if they can, again, LSU did fine in terms of getting after the pass rusher last year. And I know they've lost some good players on the edge, but you mentioned a lot of talent coming back, including Ogu Ogofi from Texas, who's obviously a star too. So I think this unit's going to be very tough. I think the Florida State offensive line is good, but it's not like great yet. I think they're still building that unit up into one of those like top tier units. I do think it lags behind theirs.
I think that's fair. Like if there is one question mark you have on the offensive side of the, I wouldn't even say question mark. It's like you have All-American play at the quarterback position, arguably the best running back in the country, arguably the best wide receivers in the country. If there's one thing that Florida State would say, yeah, it's probably not elite, is that offensive line. Now, Alex Atkins has done a phenomenal job getting this group to where it needs to be, but that could be a mismatch that might favor LSU. Now, I want to go to the LSU offense against this Florida State defense. And the story last year was Daniels just didn't have any time to throw. I mean, Jared Verse, and you had two true freshmen starting at tackle. And, I mean, it was Daniels, as much as people were like, oh, Daniels just wants to run, can't throw and stay in the pocket. He didn't have a choice. Like, he was running for his life all game last year. I think one of the biggest storylines for LSU and a reason why I'm so high on them is I think this offensive line is going to take a massive step forward. Now, is that step big enough to kind of control guys like Peyton and Jared Verse coming off the edge?
I mean, frankly, you could probably say Florida State took a bit of a step forward in terms of their defensive line. I mean, you talk about guys like Brandon Fisk, getting guys like Lovett and Verse back. Like, this is a unit that's going to come in very loaded, and it was very good last year. But, man, if Patrick Peyton, like, steps up and kind of plays second fiddle to Verse and is a stud, like, I'm looking across this unit. This is definitely a better unit from last year. LSU's offensive line's better than it was last year for sure. But I think this is a very dangerous Florida State defensive line that can be a bit of a game wrecker.
One of my biggest takes for Florida State, and I think we covered it a little bit when I took that deep dive into the defense, is what you said. Like, this team could be really special, kind of like when Hutchinson was there and then Michigan for Ajabo emerged. Like, if Patrick Peyton can emerge as, like, being an All-American quality edge rusher on the other side of Jared Verse, who I think is the best edge rusher in the country. Like, that's the recipe for Florida State on the defensive side of the ball in terms of being really elite. Now, we spent all this time gushing over Florida State's wide receivers, calling them the best wide receiver group in the country. Still, like, this LSU wide receiver room is just as good, maybe better.
A unit that's in a way different spot. Like, of course, it's kind of similar guys in a sense, but like when LSU started off last season, it was that like, is Keyshawn Boutte our guy? Like, they didn't kind of establish what they were doing. Once they kind of let Malik Neighbors start rocking and rolling, and Thomas, or Brian Thomas, I should say, start like being the guys.
Mason Taylor, add him into the list.
This was a totally different unit. So I think like Florida State really hasn't seen anything, not anything, like they saw these guys last year, but this is a far more potent unit than they saw in that week 1.
That's the best storyline about this is there's a lot of the same faces that are going to be taking the field that were taking the field 12 months ago. But both these teams have a way better identity and a sense of identity of who their guys are.
Coaching jobs by both these coaches, like
phenomenal. We're like gushing over both these teams. I mean, they're both in my top 8, potentially even top 6 when I finalize the rankings. Like both these teams are awesome. It kind of hurts me to have to pick one at the end of this, and I'm still trying to figure out who I'm going to go with. Now, I think you talk about like not knowing who your guys are. Like they didn't even know who Johnny Wilson was. And so it was like, it's going to be like these guys are kind of primed to take the field and kind of dominate. Dill, let's get to the pick then. I've been trying to beat around the bush. Who you rocking with the LSU Tigers 2.5-point favorites?
I think a slight lean to LSU. I
thought I changed your mind because before we got on.
Well, I think this game should be a flat even pick. I mean, it's which almost makes me think I should be saying Florida State, but honestly, inside of 3,
it's 2.5 points. Yeah.
So it's like it's all the same. I do think LSU's top end talent might be a little better right now. In Florida State's obviously changing that, but when you look at the blue chip ranking, not that I necessarily put my life into that like system. Yep. Florida State's not on it. LSU obviously is. So I guess in terms of just total complete teams, you maybe a slight edge to LSU in where they're pretty much very similar. I mean, 2 very good quarterbacks with a lot of experience. 2 very good wide receivers.
Very similar. Great head coaches. Like, all right.
I don't know how you split it besides maybe a slight edge from man-to-man talent to LSU.
Yeah, I'm going Florida State, and this hurts me. Like this is not a game that I'm like betting on it. But if I had to take a pick, gun that, I'm taking a pick. I like the matchup of Florida State's wide receivers. If they can protect Jordan Travis, I think that's a matchup they can exploit, like communication, all the new faces. On top of, like, I have question marks about a true freshman trotting out there. I have a question mark about an FCS player trotting out there, trying to guard freaks of athletes in Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson. So for me, Florida State having all that talent at the wide receiver position, Jordan Travis going into his last year. This is kind of his money year. We've seen steps every single year. I'm going with Florida State. I cannot wait to watch this game.
I will say Jordan Travis's progression almost makes me feel like he's going to win a national title. I mean, you talk about a guy who's improved more than I think any other football player I've really ever seen. Probably Jordan Travis. I mean, you saw him come in, take the reins in the real chaos of what FSU was a handful of years ago, and really didn't throw the ball at all. He was making the plays, but he didn't have like the skill set passing. Now he just has really developed into like an all-around pro, still has that athleticism, still has that like playmaking ability. I mean, just like, again, I feel like I've said this a lot about Jordan Travis, but that's all like what I think about it. I think
he epitomizes. I think he's one of those guys for Florida State. You talking about kind of getting out of those quote unquote dark ages. Jordan Travis, if they can come out and like win a national championship, that's like legendary stuff in Tallahassee. That'll do it from the boys. Again, appreciate y'all for checking us out. Drop them in the comment section, your picks for this game. Let's chop it up. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the boys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.